Funny, isn't it, how the loudest moments in your life aren't the ones with noise, but the ones wrapped in silence, not the applause, not the screaming, not even the chaos, just stillness. That eerie, uncomfortable stillness where nothing seems to be happening and yet everything is shifting behind the curtain. See, people want burning bushes, thunder from the sky, dramatic announcements. They want the divine to show up like a fireworks display. But that's not how it really works. That's not how power moves, not when it's personal. You wake up one day and something feels off. Not wrong, not painful, not dramatic, just off. Like the world tilted a few degrees overnight and now every step you take feels slightly crooked. The coffee doesn't hit the same. The people you used to laugh with now sound like echoes. Even your own reflection seems to flinch when you look too long. But you can't quite explain it, can you? You just know something has shifted. That's how it starts. Not with trumpets or lightning bolts. With discomfort, with silence, with that weird, crawling awareness that what used to fit doesn't anymore. You try to ignore it, blame it on stress, diet, maybe a bad dream. You try to force yourself back into the mold, hang out with the same people, talk about the same nonsense, do the same routine. But it doesn't work. It's like wearing someone else's skin. Too tight, too foreign. Everything that used to numb you just starts itching. That's the first sign that you've been marked. Not by fame, not by luck, but by purpose. Real purpose. And you know the sickest part? Nobody else can feel it. Just you. You're the only one squirming in a room full of people asleep with their eyes open. They'll call you dramatic, moody, ungrateful. You have so much to be thankful for, they'll say, and they're right, you do. But what they don't see is the war behind your eyes, the quiet kind, the kind where not fighting demons, you're fighting distractions. Fighting to stay awake in a world that rewards the walking dead. You were born for something more, but no one tells you what that more is. They just give you jobs, labels, expectations. They try to convince you that dreams are for children and discomfort is a disease. But what if it's not? What if it's direction? What if that ache you keep trying to medicate is actually a message? See, when you've been chosen, you don't get clarity first. You get chaos. You don't get applause. You get isolation. People start peeling away, not because they're bad, but because they were only meant to walk with you to the gate, not through it. And yeah, it stings. You start asking questions like, why now? Why me? What if I'm wrong? But the real question is, what if you're right? What if that discomfort is a sign that you've been drafted into something you're not supposed to fully understand yet? That's why silence is so dangerous, because in silence you meet yourself. And most people don't want that meeting. They'd rather drown in noise, in likes, in loops, in things that keep them busy enough not to notice they're dying slowly. But not you. You felt the shift. You heard the whisper. You sensed the change. And now you're standing on the edge of something invisible, being told to walk forward when every survival instinct says wait. But this isn't survival anymore. This is obedience. Not the kind that bends to men, but the kind that responds to something divine. You don't need to know the plan. You are the plan. Every pain, every detour, every delay, it wasn't random. It was precision. It was preparation, but now comes the test. Will you trust the silence? Will you follow the pull? Even when it's dark, even when it's lonely, even when it looks like nothing's moving, but everything inside you is screaming that it is. That's the paradox, right? Stillness isn't stagnation, it's construction. Foundations don't get laid in the spotlight. They get buried, quiet, hidden, unseen, until one day, boom, the world calls it sudden. You know it was sacred. You ever notice how the world claps loudest for the mask you wear best? Not the real you. Not the version buried under all that smiling, nodding small talk, but the one you crafted, the costume, the illusion. People love illusions. They're comfortable, predictable, easy to digest. The truth, not so much. The truth is messy, it's raw, it's inconvenient. So you learn to hide, not because you're weak, but because you've been trained to survive in a circus where authenticity is treated like a threat. You bury your truth so deep, you forget what it sounds like. And then one day, it starts clawing its way out. You're at work, nodding along, pretending to care about things that drain your soul. You're with friends, laughing at jokes that died in your spirit years ago. You look in the mirror and think, who the hell is that? And that's when it hits. That whisper. That quiet, relentless knock. You've outgrown your lie. You've outgrown your role. The performance has expired, but the stage lights are still on. And here's the twist. Once the lie becomes too small, the truth starts suffocating in silence. You think you're going crazy, you're not, you're waking up. And waking up hurts because now you can't pretend the noise soothes you. You can't pretend the grind fulfills you. You can't pretend the conversations are real when your soul is screaming through every fake smile. But it's not just a midlife crisis or burnout or a phase. It's exposure. You've been called. And the lie that once protected you has become the very thing poisoning you. Isn't that wild? That the very thing that once kept you safe is now the thing killing you. Slowly. You were taught to adapt, to shrink, to blend in, but the problem with shrinking to survive is that you forget how to expand when you're finally free. You dimmed your light so others wouldn't feel small. You bit your tongue to keep the peace. You smiled through betrayal, danced through disappointment, and clapped for people who wouldn't have noticed if you drowned right in front of them. But here's the punchline. Even while you were pretending, something holy was watching, waiting, preparing, not punishing you, positioning you. You ever see a lion in a cage? Still majestic, still dangerous, still royalty. But behind bars, people start thinking it's just a big cat. They forget what it's capable of until it gets out. That's what's happening to you. You're remembering your roar, and it's scaring people who only ever knew your silence. The problem isn't that they don't see your worth. The problem is you stopped seeing it too. You became so good at pretending to be okay that now you don't know how to be real without apologizing for it. So, which one of you? What have you? But let's be clear, this awakening, it's not cute, it's not romantic, it's violent. It rips, it burns, it breaks what you thought was unbreakable. It makes you question every choice, every person, every path you ever celebrated. Because purpose doesn't come wrapped in comfort. It comes dressed as confusion. And it's always louder on the inside than the outside. That's why people miss it. They're waiting for a sign in the sky when the outside, that's why people miss it. They're waiting for a sign in the sky when the outside, that's why people miss it. They're waiting for a sign in the outside, That's why people miss it. It's why people miss it. They're waiting for a sign in the outside. You keep asking for clarity, but clarity doesn't show up in the middle. It shows up after obedience. After you leave the job, cut the ties, burn the bridges, and leap without wings. That's when the picture clears up. That's when you realize it was never about the plan. It was about the courage, the audacity to believe you were made for more, even when nothing around you confirmed it. The madness to say this can't be it and actually do something about it. So here you are, on the edge of something you can't name, can't prove, can't explain, but it's real, it's alive. It's pulling you toward the version of yourself you were always meant to be. Not the version they clapped for, not the version they tolerated. The real you, the wild one, the unfiltered one. The you who stopped performing, stopped pleasing, stopped asking for permission to exist fully, loudly, dangerously. The you who isn't afraid to tell the truth, even when your voice shakes. They keep telling you to calm down, don't they? To be patient, be grateful, be realistic. They love that word, realistic. As if your dreams were some kind of disease they're trying to medicate. As if playing small is noble. As if the cage is safer than the sky. You ever notice how the people with no vision are always the loudest about what you shouldn't try? They talk like they know your limits better than your creator. But deep down, they're not trying to save you. They're trying to keep you from becoming the mirror that exposes what they never had the guts to chase. You were never meant to blend in. That ache you feel, that restlessness, that's not random. That's your inheritance knocking. That's your future screaming from the other side of the wall you've been too polite to tear down. You think your anxiety is a problem? Maybe it's prophecy. Maybe your mind is at war with your surroundings because your spirit already escaped and your body's still catching up. Ever think of that? That maybe your unease is the compass, not the curse. They taught you to be humble, but what they meant was stay small so we feel comfortable. They taught you not to ask for too much, but what they meant was don't rise so high we have to confront our own mediocrity. But here's the twist. The thing they call arrogance, it's just awareness. Awareness that you were never meant to rot in the middle. That something inside you refuses to die quietly. That you weren't born to just pay bills and make everyone else feel okay about their own abandonment of destiny. You ever walk into a room and instantly feel heavier, like your presence makes the air dense? That's not ego, that's energy, and not everyone can handle it. You're the disruptor, the glitch in the matrix, the unspoken truth walking into rooms built on denial. And of course they'll label you intense, difficult, overbearing, but you weren't sent to be liked, you were sent to be light. And light doesn't negotiate with darkness. It exposes it, unapologetically. The thing is, the moment you start moving like you know who you are, you become dangerous. Not violent, dangerous. Because people can't control someone who doesn't fear rejection. You stop needing applause and suddenly their power over you evaporates. You stop seeking validation and they panic. Because control doesn't work without consent. That's the real rebellion, not chaos, not destruction, but clarity, a soul that refuses to shrink to fit. A mind that won't sit quietly in a corner just to keep the peace. That's when they start saying, you've changed. But you didn't change. You remembered. That's all. The world keeps selling comfort like it's salvation. Settle down, settle in, settle for what you're given. They want you asleep, numb, distracted. Why? Because someone awake is a threat. Someone awake starts asking questions. starts breaking cycles, starts building things that can't be controlled. And that's terrifying to a system built on dependency. But you've felt the crack. You've seen the glitch. You've tasted the other side, even if just for a moment. And now you can't go back. Not really. You can fake it for a while, put the mask back on, play the role, but it won't stick. Not anymore. Because once you've seen your own power, once you've felt even a drop of what you're capable of, pretending gets harder. Your soul starts revolting against routine. Your energy starts rejecting environments that dishonor your calling. And people can sense it, even if they don't understand it. They feel your resistance, your intensity, and they'll try to make you doubt it, because if you stop doubting, they lose control. But here's the thing no one tells you. Becoming who you really are is violent. Not externally. Internally, you'll have to kill parts of yourself that were built for their approval. You'll have to bury versions of you that survived by staying silent. You'll grieve who you were, because who you were kept you safe, but who you're becoming will set you free. And freedom is terrifying because it means you can't blame them anymore. It means the cage is open, and now it's on you, whether or not you fly. You ever feel like the noise just never stops? Like there's always something buzzing, tapping, whispering at the edge of your sanity, just loud enough to distract you, but not loud enough to confront? That's not an accident. That's architecture, a design. They don't want you to hear yourself think. Because if you did, if you actually sat in silence long enough to recognize your own voice again, you'd realize how much of your life isn't yours at all. You've been hijacked, programmed, dressed up in ideas that don't belong to you, opinions you never questioned, goals you never wanted, desires you were taught to have, like some obedient pet chasing a treat it didn't ask for. They keep feeding you noise and calling it culture, scrolling, streaming, swiping. None of it satisfies, but all of it sedates. And here's the trick. They don't have to chain you if they can distract you. They don't have to stop your dream if they can drown it, dull it, smother it under layers of dopamine and drama until you can't even tell what you actually care about anymore. That's the real theft. Not your money, not your time, your attention. Because your attention is sacred. It's currency. And they've convinced you to spend it on garbage. Daily, hourly. Ever wonder why silence is so uncomfortable now? Why you can't even sit in a room without reaching for a screen like a reflex? Because you've been trained to escape yourself. Conditioned to treat stillness like a threat. Because in that stillness, the truth starts to show up. And the truth is inconvenient for the story you've been sold. The truth says you're not happy. The truth says you've been performing, pleasing, surviving, not living. The truth says you've betrayed parts of yourself just to fit into a life that was never built for your soul. But most people will never hear that truth. Not because it isn't speaking, but because they've forgotten how to listen. They've confused loud with important, movement with progress, busyness with purpose. But being busy isn't the same as being aligned. And if you're moving fast in the wrong direction, you're not growing, you're just getting lost faster. And deep down, you know it. You can feel it, that gnawing in your gut, that quiet rebellion inside you screaming to be heard. You're not broken. You're buried, under expectations, under fear, under everyone else's opinions about who you should be and what you should want. And the longer you ignore that quiet voice, the one that whispers instead of shouts, the more it turns into pain, emotional, physical, existential. Pain isn't the problem, it's the alarm. But what do most people do when the alarm goes off? Hit snooze, numb it, run. But that doesn't make the fire go away. It just burns quietly until it consumes you from the inside out. You see, silence isn't empty. It's full of clarity, full of wisdom, full of answers you've been begging for in the chaos. But you can't receive the message if the frequency is jammed. You can't hear the calling if you're addicted to distraction. That's why solitude feels dangerous, because it strips away the noise and all that's left is you, raw, unfiltered, no masks. And that version of you, that's the one God is trying to speak to. Not the one you perform for the world, not the polished avatar, the real you. The one who still remembers why you came here. The one who hasn't been completely anesthetized by the circus. There's a reason the greatest revelations don't come in crowds. They come in caves, in deserts, in prisons. Isolation isn't punishment, it's preparation, it's recalibration. But we've built a world where loneliness is terrifying and silence is unbearable, so we never stay still long enough to receive anything meaningful. And yet, deep inside, there's a part of you that's starving for it. Starving for presence, for peace, for real. Not the curated nonsense, not the filtered fiction, just something, anything, that feels true again. But truth doesn't shout. It doesn't trend. It doesn't beg for your attention. It waits, patiently, silently, until you're ready to remember. Funny thing about pain, most people think it's something to escape, dodge, numb, or pray away. But what they don't realize is that pain is the most honest thing they've ever met. Pain doesn't lie. It doesn't sugarcoat. It doesn't care how popular you are, how many followers you've got, or how perfect your image looks from the outside. It gets under the skin, behind the mask, and grabs you right by the throat. Not to destroy you, no, that'd be too easy. Pain shows up to wake you up. See, you don't grow when everything's going well. You grow when you're uncomfortable. When your illusions crack, when the people you thought would never leave vanish without explanation, when the ground under you gives way and you're forced to crawl instead of walk. That's where you find out what you're made of, not when the sun is shining, but when the lights go out, when the applause stops, when the silence starts to echo. That's where the real game begins. But society has done a brilliant job of making people terrified of pain, conditioned them to avoid it at all costs. Pop a pill, scroll a little more, buy something shiny, get high, get numb, just don't feel it. Don't look it in the eye. But the problem is, what you run from controls you, and what you refuse to feel festers. See, pain is like a letter from your soul, sealed with fire. And every time you ignore it, it keeps writing, keeps burning, until you either read it or it consumes everything around you. People pray for purpose, but they reject the process. They want clarity, but avoid the chaos that clarity demands. Because to get to truth, you've got to tear down comfort. You've got to dismantle the fantasy you built to survive. And that hurts. It's supposed to. Transformation isn't neat. It's brutal. Like surgery with no anesthesia. It breaks. It cuts. It strips you of everything you thought you needed until all that's left is what's real. That's why pain is sacred. It doesn't just show you what's broken, it shows you what matters, who matters. It pulls the curtain back and reveals the actors you called friends, the cages you called safety, the addictions you called entertainment. It forces you to choose, repeat or evolve. And most people, they choose repeat, because pain gives you two roads: revelation or routine. And routine feels easier, familiar, deadly, but easier. Ever notice how people go through the same heartbreak, the same betrayal, the same burnout over and over? It's not bad luck, it's refusal. A refusal to face the root, to listen to the lesson. Because when pain comes knocking, it doesn't leave until you answer. It'll disguise itself as depression, anxiety, anger, loneliness, until you finally sit down and ask, what are you trying to teach me? And oh, the answers, they don't come in words. They come in realizations, in shifts, in that one day you wake up and realize you're done. Done begging, done explaining, done pretending. That's when pain has done its job. Not when it disappears, but when it transforms you. When it takes all the shattered pieces and rearranges them into something stronger, something wiser, something unrecognizable to the version of you that thought comfort was the goal. But you can't fake this part. You can't shortcut it. You can't pretend you're healed just because you posted a quote about healing. The process doesn't care about your image. Pain doesn't play by society's rules. It's raw, it's primal, and it demands your full participation. Not your performance, not your branding, just your presence. Your willingness to sit in the fire and let it burn away everything that isn't true. And yet, that's where the beauty hides, not in the escape, but in the endurance, in staying present long enough to let the fire refine instead of destroy, in allowing yourself to be stripped so you can be rebuilt, not with old patterns, but with precision, with intention, because the person you become after pain, that's the one who can't be manipulated, who can't be broken the same way again, who knows their worth not because someone said it, but because they earned it in the dark when no one was watching.